The morning sun rose slowly over the ancient temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Golden light spread across the massive stone towers that had stood for more than 800 years. Birds sang softly in the nearby trees as the first tourists of the day began arriving at this wonder of the world. Among the early visitors was a man named Marcus Johnson. He was a wealthy businessman from New York City who owned several successful companies. Marcus wore expensive clothes and carried the latest phone model. He had paid thousands of dollars for this luxury tour of Southeast Asia. To him, this was just another item to check off his travel list. He wanted to take photos for his social media accounts to show his friends how well he was doing in life. Marcus walked quickly through the temple entrance. He barely looked at the information boards that explained the history and importance of this sacred place. He was more interested in finding the best spots for selfies. Other tourists moved slowly and quietly, showing respect for the ancient site. But Marcus pushed past them rudely when they blocked his view. On the other side of the temple grounds, a very different man was starting his day. Safi Chi was 45 years old and had worked as a security guard at Angkor Wat for 15 long years. Every morning he woke up before sunrise in his small wooden house in a nearby village. He would eat a simple breakfast of rice and vegetables, then ride his old bicycle for 30 minutes to reach the temple. Safia loved his job, even though it paid very little money. He earned only $30 each month, which was barely enough to survive. But to him, this was not just work. It was a sacred duty to protect the temple that his ancestors had built centuries ago. He treated every stone carving and every ancient wall like it was part of his own family. Each morning before the tourists arrived, Safia would walk slowly through every section of the temple complex. He carried a soft cloth and a small brush to gently clean dust from the delicate stone carvings. He knew every corner of this place. He could tell stories about the kings and gods whose images were carved into the walls. He understood which areas were most fragile and needed extra protection. Safia had learned to speak basic English, so he could help visitors understand the importance of what they were seeing. He would politely ask tourists to stay behind the rope barriers that protected the most delicate areas. Most visitors appreciated his gentle guidance and thanked him for sharing his knowledge about the temple. But Safi had bigger worries than difficult tourists. At home, his elderly mother was very sick with diabetes. She needed expensive medicine that the family could not afford. His 8-year-old daughter, Channery, was the smartest student in her class, but might have to quit school soon. The family did not have money for her books and school uniform. Despite these heavy burdens, Safi never complained. He believed that serving at this holy place was an honor. Every day he would bow respectfully to the ancient statues before beginning his work. He felt that the spirits of his ancestors were watching over him and giving him strength to continue. As the morning grew warmer, more tourists arrived at the temple. Tour buses dropped off groups of visitors from many different countries. Most of them were excited to see this famous wonder of the world. They listened carefully to their guides and followed the rules about where they could walk and what they could touch. But Marcus was growing impatient. He wanted to get closer to the most beautiful carvings for better photos. The rope barriers annoyed him because they blocked his perfect shots. He looked around for a way to get past the restrictions. He did not care about the rules that were meant to protect this ancient treasure. Safia noticed Marcus pushing against the barriers near some very fragile stonework. The guard began walking toward the tourist to politely ask him to step back. He had no idea that this simple action would lead to an incident that would change both their lives forever. Marcus had found the perfect spot for his photo. It was right next to an ancient wall covered with beautiful stone carvings of dancing figures. The artwork was over 800 years old and showed scenes from Hindu stories that were sacred to the Cambodian people. But Marcus did not care about any of that history. He only wanted the carved dancers as a background for his selfie. The problem was that thick red rope blocked access to this section. Warning signs in multiple languages clearly stated that tourists must stay back to protect the fragile stonework. The carvings had survived wars and centuries of weather, but they were still very delicate. Even the oil from human hands could damage them over time. Marcus looked around to see if anyone was watching. Then he quickly ducked under the rope barrier. He pulled out his expensive phone and started taking pictures of himself with the ancient carvings behind him. He was so focused on getting the perfect angle that he did not notice Sophie approaching. The temple guard had seen everything. This was exactly the kind of behavior that worried him most. These ancient stones were irreplaceable treasures that belonged to all humanity. Once they were damaged, they could never be fixed. Sophie had spent 15 years protecting this temple, and he took his job very seriously. Sophia walked calmly toward Marcus. He did not want to embarrass the tourist in front of other visitors. His plan was to politely explain why the barriers existed and ask the man to step back. Sophie had dealt with similar situations many times before. Most tourists were understanding once he explained the importance of protecting the ancient artwork. "Excuse me, sir," Sophie said in his careful English. His voice was gentle and respectful. "Please, you must step back from the wall. These carvings are very old and need protection." Marcus spun around with anger flashing in his eyes. He was not used to being told what to do, especially by someone he saw as just a lowly security guard. Marcus looked at Sophie's simple uniform and weathered face. He saw a man who probably earned in a month what Marcus spent on lunch. "Do you know who I am?" Marcus shouted loud enough for other tourists to hear. "I paid good money for this tour. I can take photos wherever I want." Other visitors nearby stopped what they were doing. They turned to watch the unfolding scene. Some were shocked by Marcus's rude behavior. Others felt embarrassed for him as his voice echoed through the peaceful temple grounds. Sophie remained calm despite the shouting. He had learned long ago that getting angry with difficult tourists only made situations worse. He tried again to explain in his broken English why the rules existed. "Sir, I understand you want nice photos," Sophia said patiently. "But these stones are like grandmother's hands. Very old, very fragile. We must be gentle with them." This comparison only made Marcus more furious. He felt like the guard was talking down to him and treating him like a child. His face turned red with rage as his voice grew even louder. "Don't lecture me about stones," Marcus screamed. "I've probably donated more money to museums than you'll ever see in your lifetime." The other tourists were now staring openly at the scene. Some were taking photos and videos with their phones. A few were shaking their heads in disgust at Marcus's behavior. But the businessman was too angry to care about their disapproval. In his blind rage, Marcus looked down at the temple floor. Centuries of wind had blown dust and small pieces of stone into the corners and cracks. Without thinking clearly, Marcus bent down and grabbed a handful of this ancient debris. The mixture contained dust from the original stones along with dirt and small fragments that had fallen over the years. Before anyone could react, Marcus threw the handful of dust and debris directly into Sophie's face. The cloud of particles hit the guard's eyes and covered his simple uniform. Sophie stumbled backward, temporarily blinded by the stinging dust. The watching crowd gasped in shock and horror at what they had just witnessed. The ancient dust settled slowly around Sophia as he stood there blinking his stinging eyes. Particles of 800-year-old stone covered his dark hair and simple uniform. The sacred debris that Marcus had thrown created a small cloud that seemed to hang in the air, like a ghostly reminder of what had just happened. Every tourist within sight had stopped moving. The entire section of the temple fell into complete silence except for the distant sound of birds singing in the trees. People held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Many expected the guard to explode with anger or call for help to have Marcus arrested. But what Sophia did next surprised everyone who was watching. Instead of shouting or fighting back, Sophia slowly raised his hands to his face. He gently wiped the dust from his eyes, using the back of his weathered hands. His movements were careful and deliberate, as if he was performing some kind of sacred ritual. When he could see clearly again, he looked directly at Marcus with an expression that was impossible to read. There was no anger in Sophia's dark eyes. There was no hatred or desire for revenge. Instead, his face showed something much deeper and more powerful. It was a mixture of sadness and understanding that seemed to come from years of experience with human nature. Marcus stood frozen in place, still holding his expensive phone. The anger that had consumed him moments before was already starting to fade. He began to realize what he had done as he watched the guard's peaceful response. Around him, other tourists were staring at him with looks of complete disgust and disbelief. Sofia took a step forward and did something that shocked everyone even more. He placed his hands together in front of his chest and bowed his head slightly in the traditional Cambodian greeting of respect. When he spoke, his voice was soft and gentle without any trace of anger. "Sir, I am very sorry if I made you upset," Sofia said in his careful English. "I did not mean to make you angry with me. I only wanted to protect these old stones." The watching tourists could not believe what they were hearing. This humble man was apologizing to the person who had just humiliated him in front of everyone. Some visitors began to feel ashamed that they were witnessing such a one-sided display of grace and dignity. "This temple is very old and fragile, like my grandmother's hands," Sofia continued. "My job is to keep it safe for people who come after us. I hope you can understand." Marcus felt something strange happening inside his chest. It was a feeling he had not experienced in many years. The combination of Sofia's kindness and his own terrible behavior was creating an emotion that made him uncomfortable. For the first time in a long time, Marcus was feeling genuine shame about his actions. A middle-aged woman from Australia stepped forward from the crowd. She had been taking pictures of the temple carvings when the incident happened. Her face was red with anger as she pointed her finger at Marcus. "That was absolutely disgusting behavior," she said loudly. "You should be ashamed of yourself. This man was just doing his job, and you treated him like dirt." Other tourists began to voice their agreement. An elderly German man shook his head sadly and muttered something in his native language. A young couple from Japan took several photos of Marcus with their camera, as if they wanted to document his shameful behavior. But through all of this criticism, Sofia remained calm and dignified. He gently waved his hand to discourage the other tourists from getting too angry. He did not want the situation to become worse or more complicated than it already was. "Please, it is okay," Sofia said to the crowd. "No need for more anger. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes. We must try to understand each other." His words only made the tourists more impressed with his character and more disgusted with Marcus's behavior. As word of the incident began to spread through the temple grounds, other tour guides started gathering around the scene. Many of them knew Sofia personally because he had worked at Angkor Wat longer than almost anyone else. They had watched him dedicate his life to protecting this sacred place, despite earning very little money for his efforts. An older Cambodian tour guide named Boffa stepped forward from the crowd. She had been leading tourists through the temple for over 20 years and had great respect for Sofia's dedication. She could see that the foreign visitors were curious about why the guard had responded with such grace instead of anger. "You want to know about this man," Boffa said to the gathering tourists. "Let me tell you who he really is." Marcus found himself listening despite his embarrassment. Something about the tour guide's serious tone made everyone pay attention to her words. "His name is Sofia, and he has worked here for 15 years, Boffa continued. "Every single day he comes to work before the sun rises. He rides his old bicycle for 30 minutes from his village because he cannot afford a motorbike." The tourists listened quietly as Boffa painted a picture of Sofia's daily life. She explained how he earned only $30 each month, which was barely enough to buy rice and vegetables for his small family. Most Western tourists spent more than that on a single meal. "But he never complains about the money," Boffa said. "He says this temple is like a holy church to him. He believes protecting it is his duty to his ancestors and to future generations." A young backpacker from England raised her hand with a question. "Does he have a family to support?" she asked. Boffa nodded sadly. "His mother is very sick with diabetes. She needs medicine that costs more money than his whole salary. Sometimes Sofia does not eat lunch so he can buy her pills." The crowd grew more silent as they learned about Sofia's struggles. Marcus felt his stomach tightening as he realized how difficult life must be for this man he had just humiliated. "He also has a daughter named Channery," Boffa continued. She is 8 years old and very smart in school, but soon she might have to stop studying because the family cannot pay for her books and uniform. An American woman gasped when she heard this. His daughter might have to quit school because of money, she asked in disbelief. Yes, Boffa replied. In Cambodia, many children cannot continue their education because their families are too poor. Safi dreams that his daughter will become a teacher or doctor someday. But without school, that dream might die. Marcus looked over at Sofia, who was quietly cleaning the dust from his uniform. The guard was not listening to the conversation about his personal life. Instead, he was focused on gently brushing particles away from the ancient stone carvings where some of the thrown dust had landed. Another tour guide joined the discussion. He was a young man named Pisach, who had learned English at university. Sofia could easily find a better job in the city, Pisach said. Many hotels would hire him because he speaks English and knows so much about Khmer history, but he refuses to leave this temple. Why won't he take a better job? Asked a tourist from Canada. Because he believes someone must protect these stones, Pisach explained. He says if everyone leaves for money, then our history will be destroyed by careless people who do not understand its value. As the guides shared more stories about Sofi's character, the watching tourists began to understand what kind of person Marcus had attacked. They learned that Sofi often used his own money to buy cleaning supplies for the temple. He would spend his lunch money on soft brushes and gentle soap to care for the ancient carvings. The guides also explained that Sofi had memorized hundreds of stories about the temple's history. He could identify every god and king carved in the stone walls. During quiet moments, he would share these stories with visitors who showed genuine interest in learning about Cambodian culture. Last year, during the rainy season, part of the temple roof was leaking, Boffa said. Sofi spent his own money to buy plastic sheets to protect the carvings from water damage. He did not ask his supervisor for permission. He just saw a problem and fixed it. By now, several tourists were wiping tears from their eyes as they realized the depth of Sofi's dedication and sacrifice. Marcus stood frozen in place, feeling smaller and more ashamed with every story he heard about this remarkable man's character and selfless service. Marcus stood completely still as the full weight of Sofi's story settled in his mind. Every word the tour guides had spoken felt like a hammer blow to his conscience. He watched the humble guard continue his work as if nothing had happened while tourists around him whispered about what they had just learned. The businessman looked down at his expensive designer clothes and gold watch. He calculated that his watch alone was worth more than Sofia would earn in 10 years of dedicated service. The leather shoes on his feet cost more than this man's entire monthly salary. Yet Sofia had shown more dignity and grace in the past few minutes than Marcus had displayed in years. A group of teenage students from a nearby international school had gathered to watch the scene unfold. One of them approached Marcus with a smartphone in her hand. The screen showed a video she had recorded of the entire incident from the moment Marcus threw the dust until Sofi's graceful response. "Sir, I think you should see this," the student said quietly. "This video shows what really happened here." Marcus watched himself on the small screen and felt sick to his stomach. He saw his own face twisted with anger and arrogance. He heard his own voice shouting rudely at a man who had only been trying to do his job. Most shocking of all, he watched himself grab ancient dust from the temple floor and throw it into the face of someone who had never done anything to deserve such treatment. "Are you going to post this online?" Marcus asked the student with growing panic in his voice. "I don't know yet," she replied honestly. "My friends think the whole world should see how tourists sometimes behave in our country. But maybe you can change their minds by doing something good." Marcus realized that his reputation and business could be destroyed if this video spread on social media. People would see him as an ugly American who disrespected other cultures and treated poor people badly. His customers and business partners would be disgusted by his behavior. But something else was bothering Marcus even more than the threat to his reputation. For the first time in many years, he was forced to look at himself honestly. He saw a man who had become so focused on money and status that he had forgotten how to treat other human beings with basic respect. Marcus walked closer to where Sofia was working. The guard was using a soft brush to gently clean dust from the carved face of an ancient dancer. His movements were careful and loving, as if he was caring for a living person rather than a stone statue. "How long have you been working here?" Marcus asked quietly. Sophia looked up with surprise. He had not expected the angry tourist to speak to him again. 15 years, sir," he replied in his careful English. "And you really only earn $30 a month," Marcus continued. "Yes, sir. It is not much money, but I am happy to serve this holy place." Marcus felt his eyes beginning to water as he processed this information. He spent more than $30 on a single cup of coffee at the expensive hotels where he usually stayed. This man supported his entire family and cared for ancient treasures on an amount of money that Marcus would not even notice if it fell out of his pocket. "Your daughter might have to quit school because of money?" Marcus asked. Sophia's expression grew sad, but he nodded. "Yes, sir. Books and uniform cost too much for our family. But maybe she can work and study later when she is older." The resignation in Sophia's voice broke something inside Marcus's heart. Here was a man who had dreams for his child just like any parent, but was watching those dreams slip away because of poverty. Meanwhile, Marcus had more money than he could spend in several lifetimes, but had never used it to help anyone except himself. Marcus thought about his own childhood and the opportunities his wealthy family had given him. Private schools, expensive tutors, college education, and unlimited chances to succeed. Everything had been handed to him on a silver platter, while Sophia's brilliant daughter might never get even basic education because her father earned poverty wages protecting humanity's heritage. The businessman looked around at the ancient temple with new eyes. For the first time, he began to understand what this place really meant. It was not just a tourist attraction for taking selfies. It was a sacred link between past and present that connected millions of people to their history and culture. Men like Sophia were the guardians of human civilization itself. They stood between priceless treasures and the forces that would destroy them through neglect or disrespect. They did this job not for money or recognition, but because they understood that some things were more important than personal gain. Marcus realized that in his moment of anger he had not just thrown dust at a security guard. He had attacked everything this man represented: honor, dignity, sacrifice, and service to something greater than oneself. The next morning, Marcus returned to Angkor Wat Temple before most tourists arrived. He had spent the entire night thinking about what had happened and what kind of person he had become. Sleep had been impossible as Sophia's gentle face and patient words kept replaying in his mind. Marcus found Sophia in the same section where the incident had occurred. The guard was carefully cleaning morning dew from the ancient stone carvings using a soft cloth. He worked with the same dedication and gentleness that Marcus had witnessed the day before. "Excuse me," Marcus said quietly as he approached. His voice was completely different from the angry shouting of yesterday. Now he sounded humble and uncertain. Sophia looked up with surprise. He recognized the tourist who had thrown dust in his face, but he showed no fear or anger. Instead, his expression remained calm and respectful as always. "Good morning, sir," Sophia said politely. "You are here very early today." Marcus took a deep breath and tried to find the right words. Speaking had never been difficult for him in business meetings or social events, but apologizing for such terrible behavior was something he had rarely done in his adult life. "I came to say I am sorry," Marcus began. "What I did yesterday was wrong. Very wrong. I have no excuse for treating you that way." Sophia stopped his cleaning and gave Marcus his full attention. He could see that the wealthy tourist was genuinely struggling with his emotions. The anger and arrogance from yesterday had been replaced by something that looked like shame and regret. "You do not need to apologize, sir," Sophia replied gently. "Everyone has bad days sometimes. I understand you were frustrated." This gracious response made Marcus feel even worse about his behavior. Here was a man offering forgiveness before it was even asked for. Marcus reached into his expensive leather wallet and pulled out a thick roll of cash. "Please take this money," Marcus said, holding out several $100 bills. "I know it cannot undo what I did, but maybe it can help your family." Sophia looked at the money for a long moment. Marcus could see him thinking carefully about the offer. The amount Marcus was holding represented more than a year's salary for the temple guard. It could pay for his mother's medicine and his daughter's education with money left over for many other needs. But to Marcus's surprise, Sophie shook his head and gently pushed the money away. "Thank you for your kindness, sir, but I cannot take your money," Sophia said quietly. "Why not?" Marcus asked with confusion. "I know you need it for your family." Sophia looked toward the ancient temple walls as he tried to explain his feelings in English. "Money cannot fix what happened to this holy place yesterday," he said slowly. "When you threw the dust, it was not just at me. It was at 800 years of history and the spirits of my ancestors." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he began to understand the deeper meaning of his actions. He had not just insulted a person. He had shown disrespect to an entire culture and civilization. "Then how can I make this right?" Marcus asked desperately. "There must be something I can do." Sophie smiled for the first time since Marcus had met him. "If you really want to help, then listen and learn," he said. "Let me show you what this temple really means." For the next 2 hours, Sophia guided Marcus through the temple complex. But this was completely different from any tourist tour Marcus had ever experienced. Sophie spoke with passion and knowledge that came from 15 years of studying every stone and carving. He showed Marcus scenes carved in the walls that depicted ancient battles between good and evil. He explained the Hindu stories that the sculptures represented and how they taught important lessons about life and morality. He pointed out details in the stonework that most visitors never noticed. "See this dancing girl," Sophia said, pointing to an elegant carving. "She represents the beauty and grace that humans can achieve when they live in harmony with the divine." The artists who carved her believed that creating beautiful things was a way to worship God. Marcus found himself completely absorbed in Sophie's explanations. He began to see the temple not as a collection of old stones, but as a masterpiece of human achievement. Every carving told a story. Every wall contained wisdom from people who had lived centuries ago. "The kings who built this place wanted to create something that would last forever," Sophia continued. "They knew their bodies would die, but they hoped their works would inspire people for thousands of years." As they walked through different sections of the temple, Marcus felt his understanding deepening. He realized that places like this were libraries written in stone. They contained the dreams, hopes, and beliefs of entire civilizations. "Now you begin to understand why I protect this place," Sophia said as their tour concluded. "It is not just my job. It is my honor and my duty." As Sophie's guided tour continued, Marcus felt something profound happening inside his mind and heart. Every story the guard shared about the ancient carvings seemed to chip away at the wall of selfishness and arrogance that Marcus had built around himself over the years. They stopped in front of a massive stone relief that showed hundreds of figures engaged in an epic battle. Warriors rode elephants into combat, while gods and demons fought in the sky above them. The level of detail was incredible, with every face and weapon carved with perfect precision. "This shows the great battle between good and evil," Sophia explained. "The ancient people believed that this fight happens not just in heaven, but inside every human heart. We must choose every day whether to be good or selfish." Marcus stared at the carving and felt like it was speaking directly to him. He thought about all the choices he had made in his life that put his own desires above the needs of others. His businesses had made him wealthy, but he had never asked whether his success helped or hurt other people. "What does it mean to choose good?" Marcus asked quietly. Sophia pointed to a section of the relief that showed figures helping fallen warriors and caring for the wounded. "Good means thinking about others, not just yourself," he said. "It means using your strength to protect those who are weak instead of taking advantage of them." They moved to another area where stone carvings depicted daily life in ancient Cambodia. Marcus saw farmers working in rice fields, families gathering for meals, and children playing together. Despite being carved centuries ago, these scenes showed the same hopes and struggles that people still face today. "These people worked hard and had simple dreams," Sophie said. They wanted food for their families, safety for their children, and respect from their neighbors. Not so different from people today. Marcus thought about his own family back in New York. His parents had worked hard to build their business and give him opportunities. But somewhere along the way he had forgotten their values of treating all people with dignity regardless of their social status or wealth. As they walked deeper into the temple complex, Sophie showed Marcus sections that had been damaged by war and weather over the centuries. Some carvings were missing pieces while others had been worn smooth by rain and wind. "This is why protection is so important," Sophia said, touching a cracked stone gently. "Once these treasures are gone, they can never be replaced. Each generation must decide whether to preserve them or let them disappear." Marcus began to understand that Sophia and the other temple guards were fighting a constant battle against time and neglect. They stood between priceless human heritage and the forces that would destroy it. Their work was not just about tourism or national pride. It was about preserving the accumulated wisdom and beauty of human civilization. "How many guards work here?" Marcus asked. "Only 12 for the entire temple complex," Sophia replied. "We need more people, but the government has no money to hire them. Sometimes we work 7 days a week without rest." Marcus was shocked by how few people were responsible for protecting such an important site. He began to realize that places like Angkor Wat survived only because of the dedication of individuals like Sophia, who worked for almost nothing because they believed in something greater than personal gain. They reached the highest point of the temple where ancient kings had once prayed to their gods. The view stretched for miles across jungle and rice fields. Birds circled overhead, while the morning sun cast long shadows across the stone surfaces. "The kings who built this place understood something important," Sophie said as they looked out over the landscape. "They knew that true greatness comes not from taking but from giving, not from conquering but from creating, not from destroying but from building something beautiful that will outlast your own life." Marcus felt tears beginning to form in his eyes as the full impact of Sophie's words hit him. For years he had measured success only in terms of money and power. He had competed ruthlessly with others and celebrated when his victories came at their expense. But standing in this ancient place, listening to this humble man, Marcus began to see a completely different definition of success. True achievement meant contributing something positive to the world. It meant using whatever gifts and resources you possess to make life better for others, not just yourself. "I have lived my whole life wrong," Marcus said quietly. Sophie shook his head gently. "No, sir. You have lived your life the way you were taught. But now you can choose to live differently. It is never too late to change." The guard's words offered hope rather than judgment. Despite everything Marcus had done, Sophia was still willing to believe that people could grow and become better versions of themselves. That evening, Marcus sat alone in his luxury hotel room, staring out at the lights of the city. The expensive suite felt hollow and meaningless after his day at the temple with Sophia. Room service had delivered a meal that cost more than most Cambodians earned in a week, but Marcus barely touched the food. He kept thinking about Sophie's 8-year-old daughter, who might have to quit school because her family could not afford books and uniforms. He thought about the guard's sick mother who needed medicine that cost more than their monthly income. Most of all, he thought about Sophie himself, working 7 days a week for almost nothing because he believed protecting the temple was his sacred duty. Marcus opened his laptop and began researching the situation at Angkor Wat. He learned that the temple complex received over 2 million visitors each year, generating millions of dollars in tourism revenue for Cambodia. But very little of that money reached the guards and staff who actually protected the site. He discovered that most temple guards earned between $20 and $40 per month while working in difficult conditions with minimal training or equipment. Many had to take second jobs just to feed their families. Some of the most experienced guards had left for better-paying work in hotels or restaurants, leaving the ancient temples with inadequate protection. Marcus also learned about the constant threats facing the temple. Air pollution from nearby cities was slowly eating away at the stone surfaces. Illegal logging in surrounding forests was damaging the water systems that had sustained the temple for centuries. Climate change was bringing more severe weather that cracked and eroded the ancient structures. The more Marcus read, the more he understood that Safi's work was not just important for Cambodia, but for all humanity. Angkor Wat was recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site because it belonged to everyone on Earth. Future generations had the right to experience this wonder just as people had for hundreds of years. But Marcus also saw an opportunity. His business success had given him resources that could make a real difference in protecting this irreplaceable treasure. For the first time in his life, he began to think about using his wealth for something beyond his own comfort and status. The next morning, Marcus returned to the temple earlier than before. He found Safia beginning his daily routine of cleaning and inspection. The guard smiled warmly when he saw the businessman approaching. "Good morning, sir," Safia said. "You are becoming an early riser like us temple workers." "I need to talk to you about something important," Marcus said. "Is there somewhere we can speak privately?" Safia led him to a quiet corner of the temple complex where they could talk without being overheard by tourists or other staff members. Marcus had prepared his words carefully during the sleepless night. "Yesterday, you showed me something I had never seen before," Marcus began. "You helped me understand what this place really means and why it matters. Now I want to do something meaningful to help." Safia listened carefully as Marcus explained his ideas. The businessman wanted to establish a fund that would provide better salaries for temple guards and money for equipment and training. He also wanted to pay for Safi's daughter's education all the way through university. "But I need your help to do this right," Marcus continued. "I don't want to just throw money at the problem. I want to create something that will really make a lasting difference." Safi was quiet for a long time as he processed what Marcus was proposing. The guard had never imagined that a tourist, especially one who had behaved so badly, could be interested in making such a commitment. "Why do you want to do this, sir?" Safi asked. "You could spend your money on many other things." Marcus thought carefully about how to answer. "Because you taught me that some things are more important than money," he said. "This temple has survived for 800 years because people like you decided it was worth protecting. I want to be part of that tradition instead of someone who just takes from it." "And what about your business and your life in America?" Safi asked. "This is very far from your home." "I've been thinking about that too," Marcus replied. "I have enough money to last several lifetimes. Maybe it's time to focus on building something that will outlast my own life, just like the kings who built this temple." Safi looked into Marcus's eyes and saw something that had not been there during their first meeting. The arrogance and selfishness were gone, replaced by genuine humility and a desire to contribute something positive to the world. "If you are serious about this commitment," Safia said slowly, "then I will help you. But you must understand that this work is not easy. There will be many challenges and frustrations. Sometimes you will want to give up." "I understand," Marcus replied. "But I also understand now that the most important things in life are worth fighting for even when it's difficult." 6 months later, a small crowd gathered at Angkor Wat Temple for a very special ceremony. Word had spread throughout the local community about the remarkable transformation that had taken place between a wealthy American tourist and a humble Cambodian temple guard. Marcus had returned to Cambodia 3 times during those months, working with Safia and local officials to establish what they called the Temple Guardian Foundation. The fund provided better salaries for all 12 guards at Angkor Wat, along with money for proper equipment training and health care for their families. But the foundation's work went beyond just improving working conditions. Marcus had also funded a scholarship program that would allow the children of temple workers to attend school and university. The first recipient was Safi's daughter Chaneri, who was now thriving in her studies with dreams of becoming a doctor. The ceremony taking place on this warm morning was both a celebration and a blessing. Buddhist monks had come to offer prayers for the success of the foundation, while government officials and community leaders gathered to witness the formal announcement of the program. Safia stood nervously in his best clothes as he prepared to speak to the assembled crowd. His wife and daughter had traveled from their village to attend the ceremony. Chaneri wore her new school uniform with pride, while clutching the books that Marcus's foundation had provided. 6 months ago, I met a tourist who taught me something very important. Sophia began in his careful English. He showed me that people can change when they open their hearts to understanding and forgiveness. Marcus listened from the audience, feeling overwhelmed by the reality of what they had accomplished together. The businessman had discovered that using his wealth to help others brought him more satisfaction than any profitable deal he had ever completed. This foundation will help protect our ancient temple for future generations, Sophia continued. But more than that, it shows what can happen when people from different countries and backgrounds work together for something good. When Sophia finished speaking, the crowd erupted in applause. Several of the other temple guards stepped forward to thank Marcus personally for his generosity. Many of them had tears in their eyes as they described how the foundation would change their families' lives. But the most emotional moment came when Sophia's elderly mother was brought forward in a wheelchair. She had been receiving proper medical treatment for her diabetes thanks to the healthcare benefits provided by the foundation. Her condition had improved dramatically, and her doctor said she might live many more years. The old woman took Marcus's hands in her weathered fingers and spoke in Khmer. A translator explained that she was calling him her son and blessing him for his kindness to her family. She said that the spirits of her ancestors would watch over him and protect him for the rest of his life. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as he listened to her words. This woman who had lived through war and poverty was offering him the greatest gift. She possessed her love and acceptance as part of her family. Little Channery stepped forward shyly and handed Marcus a drawing she had made at school. It showed the temple with figures representing her father and Marcus working together to protect it. At the bottom she had written in careful English, "Thank you for helping my family and my country." The simple drawing broke down the last walls around Marcus's heart. He knelt down to Channery's level and promised her that he would continue supporting her education until she achieved her dreams of becoming a doctor. "You saved us," Sophia said quietly as he and Marcus stood together watching the celebration continue around them. "But I think maybe we saved you too." Marcus nodded, unable to speak as he thought about how dramatically his life had changed. The angry, selfish man who had thrown dust in a temple guard's face was gone. In his place was someone who understood that true wealth came from giving, not taking, and that real success meant contributing to something larger than yourself. The ceremony concluded with a traditional Cambodian blessing dance performed by local children. As the young dancers moved gracefully around the ancient temple, their movements seemed to bring the carved stone figures to life. Past and present joined together in a celebration of human dignity, respect, and the power of forgiveness to transform lives. As the sun set over Angkor Wat, Marcus and Sophie stood together in the same spot where their conflict had begun 6 months earlier. But now, instead of anger and misunderstanding, there was friendship and shared purpose. "The stones will remember our story," Sophia said softly. "Long after we are gone, people will come here and feel the love that we built together."